Saint isn't new to being a finisher. He knew the risk that he was taking when he got on that plane. He also knew the risk that he was taking when he got on it with his brother. I think we both know that Saint is loyal. But can we say the same thing about Sincere? This is Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Resurrection, Part 5. Child, when we left off, it was going down. Puerto Rico, the plan to attack and take hostage Pastor Corey, Stephanie, and their 2-year-old, Kari, had been foiled by the Lopez organization. Their place and OG had been snatched. And the goons who'd done the snatching had absolutely no idea that they were playing right into the notorious Five Families plan. And in Paris, Saint was looking at his emails. He did not have time to give Natalia a thorough response, but he also didn't want to leave her hanging. So he drafted a quick note, hit send, and made a phone call. He called his big cousin, Q. When Q answered, Saint said, "I need a solid. I need to know if this operation has hit anybody's radar, particularly Interpol." Q said, "I'll look into it. In the meantime, what's up?" Saint said, "I might be overthinking it, but I think we need to get out of Paris." Q said, "Trust your instincts. Head to Puerto Rico. I'll meet you there. I'll let Catherine know, and she can handle informing the rest of the team." About an hour or so later, Catherine was on the phone with Sincere and Ezra, and she was giving them their marching orders. Those members of the team who'd been flown in just for the operation needed to get out of Paris. The team members who were stationed there needed to stay on their jobs, but keep their eyes and ears open. Once the instructions were given, it was Ezra's job to ensure that Sincere and Saint both got out of Paris. And once the instructions were followed, Ezra needed to head to Puerto Rico. When Sincere asked, "And where me and Saint supposed to be going?" Catherine said, "Well, where you're going should be your only concern. Saint's being reassigned." Sincere asked, "But what about completing the 6 and 7 assignments? Why we can't just go on to Japan?" Catherine said, "Because if anything happens to Japan, Paris is going to be a done deal." Based on all of the intel that Catherine had amassed on Nigel's mistresses, it was clear that number 6, Paris, was not only the most isolated and would be the most difficult to touch, but she was also the least known. While number 7, the one in Japan, was the most well known, her disappearance would be the most noticed. And she'd been saved for last to ensure that the other 6 didn't get tipped off that there was danger afoot. Sincere, Saint, and the rest of the team hadn't really had any issues since the setup that Amir had tried to put in play. When they were dealing with Miss New York, he tried to set a trap that was intended to take out Big Wood. And in that instance, it was Sincere who'd recognized that something wasn't quite right. The team hadn't come to Paris once, but twice to complete this same job. And it was clear that Sincere was over it. The completion of these assignments was intended to be a test of his ability to manage operations. Where the stakes were high, the payoff was low, and the number of people with a vested interest in his failure was limited. Sincere was in charge of what could only be called a counterintelligence operation. Each of the women that Nigel had been involved with were under St. James' protection, and Catherine couldn't just pull that protection and then have those women eliminated, because if she did, their deaths would be questioned and all fingers would be pointed at her. Instead, Sincere and his team had to outsmart their own soldiers and get rid of each of the women with as few casualties as possible. The St. James organization had men and women stationed in all of the cities where these women lived. They were responsible for finding out how the women moved, who existed in their worlds, and to identify the most logical elimination methods, times, and places. It was Sincere's job to oversee the operation, and Saint's job to finish. With Big Wood deceased, the General Ezra was testing his skills as a potential right hand for Sincere. And at about the same time that Saint was making that call to Q, Ezra had been making one to Catherine. So Catherine was not at all surprised when her call with Sincere and Ezra was interrupted by the general assigned to her, coming in to tell her that 17 had been compromised. Catherine said, "Ezra, you need to go. You need to call Q. Sincere, you need to tell me what the hell is going on in Paris." Sincere said, I don't know what you're talking about. Catherine said, yes, you do. Meanwhile, in Puerto Rico, when Pastor Corey got the all clear, right around the start of the 11 a.m. service, his caravan pulled out of the underground parking lot under the convention center and took an alternative route back to the Lopez estate. When he arrived at the villa that he shared with Stephanie and baby Kari, Marisol and a midwife were there with Stephanie. She was definitely in labor, 4 centimeters dilated, and refusing to leave her home and head to the birthing center. Initially, the plan was that she would give birth at the birthing center, owned and operated by Marisol and her daughter Maribel. But when the plot was discovered against her, CT, and baby Kari, she decided that she'd deliver at home. When baby Kari was born, she'd labored all night at home alone. And it was the grace of God that sent Angela checking about her baby sister, resulting in Angela delivering baby Kari in a wing of their estate in Dallas. So Stephanie figured if she could do that then, she could do it now. She did not want to take the risk of being transported away from the Lopez estate, smack dab in the middle of an operation. CT said, Steph, that's ridiculous. I get your aversion to hospitals, but the birthing center is under Lopez protection. Stephanie said, I feel safe here. I'm staying here. Now, if you want to be the one that's pregnant, going through all this pain and delivering a baby, you can go to the birthing center. CT said, no, I'll pass. Marisol said, I've delivered plenty of babies at home. I have everything that I need here. And whether she labors at the birthing center or here, if any issue arises, she'll be transported to a hospital. CT said, fine. I'm not going to be able to change her mind anyway. Is Manny available? Shortly thereafter, there was a knock at the door. And when CT went to open it, it was Emmanuel Manny Lopez. When CT asked him how the operation went, Manny said, as expected, our man's been taken alive, the tracker is working, and we should have a finisher on the ground in a matter of hours. I understand you need to be focused on your wife and your unborn baby, so let me focus on this operation. When CT asked where Nate was, the general assigned to his security team, Manny said, he's a little busy right now. Then Manny got a phone call from his right hand, Javier. Manny said, I need to take this. Keep me posted on Stephanie. When Manny walked out, Rennie walked in. She said, okay now, I heard it was baby time. We doing this here. Several hours later, Catherine returned to the main house at the St. James estate in Miami. And waiting for her at the door was Natalia. She said, I guess we were both working on the Lord's Day, huh? Catherine said, yeah, I had to manage an operation. Natalia said, anything you want to tell me? Catherine said, no. Natalia said, you don't want to tell me what's going on with Saint? Catherine said, why would I do that? Natalia said, because I heard over one of these lieutenants or soldiers or whoever they are's radio that 17 has been compromised. Catherine said, what you know about 17? Natalia said, I know that that's Saint's finisher number. I also know that right before I overheard that, I received a very brief email from him saying that he didn't have time to answer the questions that I was asking him, but he didn't want my email to go unanswered. So we would discuss it when we see each other next. And if I see Sincere before I see him, not to believe anything that he tells me. What did Sincere do? And what kind of trouble is Saint in? Catherine said, the situation is developing. Q is handling it. And you don't have to worry about seeing Sincere, because he's on his way to Puerto Rico. Natalia asked, what is going on in Puerto Rico? Catherine said, I'm not at liberty to discuss that with you. Natalia said, fine, I'll call my daddy. Catherine said, he's a little busy right now. We've got our pots in multiple fires, and we don't need civilians sticking their noses where they don't belong. I understand that you are concerned about Saint. I'm sorry that you overheard code over a radio without context. And I'm sorry that I can't clear it up for you right now. But that's the nature of the business. You aren't new to this. Natalia said, I'm new to being in love with a man and not knowing where he is, what he's doing, or what kind of trouble he's gotten himself into. And I'm definitely new to having to consider whether his brother has something to do with that trouble. Catherine said, the truth is I don't have enough information to even begin to assuage your fears. If you're concerned about him, you've got to know that so am I. But if I have to trust that Q is more than capable of handling whatever is happening, then so do you. You might be new to being in a relationship with a finisher, but Saint isn't new to being a finisher. He knew the risk that he was taking when he got on that plane. He also knew the risk that he was taking when he got on it with his brother. After a brief silence, Natalia said, I think we both know that Saint is loyal. But can we say the same thing about Sincere? Catherine said, they are both Nigel's sons. Meanwhile, at a backup safe house in Puerto Rico, the unarmed man who was found in the back seat of that chauffeured car and taken hostage by the goons hired by the International Trafficking Organization to take Stephanie, CT, and baby Kari was tied up and being interrogated. And he wasn't giving up nothing. After countless slaps, punches, and kicks, none of the goons' questions were being answered. They asked who he was, what his role was in the Lopez organization, why he was in the back seat of the car instead of CT, Stephanie, and baby Kari, how the Lopez organization found out about the plan, how they'd found their initial safe house, where the Lopez organization had taken all of the men and women that they'd taken alive, what the Lopez organization planned to do next, what he knew about the people who hired them, and getting no information from him. Finally, they took his pictures and his print, submitted them to their contact in the International Trafficking Organization digitally, and waited. What they didn't know was as soon as they took that first photograph, they'd activated the RFID chip that had been surgically implanted in that man's neck. So the Lopez organization knew exactly where he was. But they weren't coming. They were waiting for the big fish. And the man they captured was in it for the long haul. When Q told Angela that he'd be heading to Puerto Rico, leaving her with the newborn twins and their other 5 children, she knew that something had to be terribly wrong. She asked, I thought you said that the operation had gone as expected. What has changed? Q said, Saint had been keeping me, and unknowingly, Big Wood, updated on the situation in Paris. It seems that he and Big Wood had the same feelings about it. There was a change in old girl's patterns. Her security was moving different, and Saint thought that he might have picked up a tail. He backed off and leaned into his cover story, avoided the rest of the team, and didn't make any efforts to shake the tail. He created a scenario where he was overheard addressing a business emergency in New York. The plan was for him to get a last-minute flight, commercially, to New York. From there, I was going to pull him in on the job in Puerto Rico. He asked me to check and see if he or the job had come up on Interpol. And before I could do that, he was stopped on his way to the airport. He's currently in custody of Paris Prefecture and waiting for an investigator from Interpol to come in and question him. Angela asked, and are they on the Sincere? Anybody else? Q said, it doesn't look like it. Saint was careful, as he should have been. But based on my conversations with Ezra and Catherine, I think Sincere is dirty. Angela said, no. Please tell me that this isn't about Natalia? Q said, I don't want to believe that he'd do his brother dirty over a woman who clearly does not want him. But if I understand this lifelong competition that they got going on, then it's very well possible. And that's why I'm going to Puerto Rico. I'm having Sincere meet me there. Not only do I need to get to the bottom of this, but the assignment in Paris needs to be completed, either while Saint is in custody or after he's left Paris, in order to divert suspicion away from him. Angela said, and what are you not telling me, Q? Q said, love, this plan that your uncle concocted with Big Nate only works if we can dangle a big fish. Manny is willing to be that big fish, but he not the one they want. We know they want me. Angela said, Q, you can't do this. Q said, I have to do this. This has to end. They've come after 3 of our children. My brother's wife, his baby's mother, Simone, and Chantal. They think they've killed Big Wood, and they still haven't stopped. They got other organizations thinking that they can actually try the 5 families. Miss Bernie is dead. LJ is shot. They've even gone after 2 of my employees, one of whom is married to my cousin. What would you have me do, love? What kind of man would I be if I let any and everybody else fight my battles? I am ending this once and for all. Several hours later in Paris, Saint had come face to face with the investigator from Interpol and several of the officers from the Paris Prefecture. The investigator said, I'm going to get right to it. Why are you in Paris? Saint said, you already know. I provided that information to Customs when I arrived. The investigator said, I'm asking you. Saint said, and I'm telling you to check the file. I have a plane that I need to catch to get home and handle business. And I don't appreciate being detained without explanation. The investigator said, I'm not the one who needs to give an explanation. You are. So I'm going to ask you again, why are you in Paris? And Saint just stared. After several moments, the investigator said, did you not hear or understand the question? Saint said, I don't answer questions without legal representation. The investigator said, you're not in America. You're not due legal representation or a phone call. Saint said, I'm a U.S. citizen. I have the legal right internationally to notify the consulate that I've been taken into custody, to request representation, and to be provided with an explanation as to why I've been taken into custody. I also have the right to remain silent. The Interpol investigator looked at one of the officers and nodded his head. The officer got up, left the room, and returned with a phone. He sat it on the table, and after a few moments, Saint said, privacy, please. When the three men stood up and left the room, Saint called a safe number that he knew by heart. And when his handler with the St. James organization answered the phone, saying, Montclair Enterprises, this is Sarah. How can I help you? Saint said, Sarah, this is Mr. Montclair. It looks like I'm not going to make my flight home. Then he told Sarah to contact the U.S. Embassy in Paris to notify them that he'd been taken into custody, to contact the law firm that represented Montclair Enterprises internationally and have them send over a legal representation, and to notify his client that they would need to reschedule their impending meeting. When the call ended, it took nearly 2 hours for the investigator with Interpol and the two officers to return to the interrogation room. They'd use all of the technology and connections at their disposal to track Saint's call, research Montclair Enterprises, and come up with absolutely nothing that would prove that he was a hired gun, there to kill Michelle Devereaux. Meanwhile, in Denver, True had woken from her sedation, and Miss Charlotte was exactly where she was when True had finished reading Big Wood's letter and lost it, sitting right there at her bedside. Miss Charlotte said, True, I'm so sorry, baby. True said, no, you're not. You let me believe that your son was dead. You virtually watched my absolute agony, fed me lines worth of bull crap, and he probably coached you and showed up here for what? So you could see just how bad I was faring? Miss Charlotte said, it was never my idea to keep this from you. I did everything that I could to convince him that it was a terrible idea. I have no idea why he wouldn't just tell you. Months ago, before I left, he told me that he would explain. True said, yeah, he's going to explain. Right after I tell him what he already knows, I'm sure. It's probably all his idea to send Bosch here as my protection. He set me up. Miss Charlotte said, I don't know anything about that. I know there was somebody here with you before you got the rest of your security. And from what I heard, he was the best of the best. True asked, and he didn't tell you that he saw me with him in his hospital room? Miss Charlotte said, True, I won't lie to you. True said, like you've been lying to me for months. Miss Charlotte said, I haven't been lying. I've been minding my business. You are about to be a mother. I pray that you are never in this situation, but I can just about guarantee you're going to be in some situations where your adult child is going to make decisions that you don't necessarily agree with, and they're going to need your support. Now, if you anything like the woman I think you are, then it'll be jail or hell behind Genesis. Clearly, you have opinions about what I should not have done. Tell me what you think I should have done. When True didn't respond, Miss Charlotte said, I don't know what Big Wood put in that letter. He hadn't written it before I left, and I haven't read it. But if I know my son, then I know that you've got some hard decisions to make. He's going to show up here, and while he's not going to show up, talking and walking the way you remember him, he is still the same man that he was before. Almost dying may have even made him better, but he ain't going for no half-stepping. He's going to want everything or nothing, and once he gets here, he ain't leaving. So what do you need from me? In order to help you decide, I'm here to support you. I came because your last journal entry had me concerned. Your pain was palpable, True. And I wouldn't wish that kind of agony on my worst enemy. You don't deserve any of the things that have happened. Not that whole mess with Amira, not being attacked at Angela and Stephanie's estate, not believing that you lost the man you loved, and certainly not spending the last few months of your pregnancy alone. True said, I wasn't alone. Bosch was here. At first, he was operating in his capacity as a lieutenant. It did not take long for us to become friends. And it was not long after that he became my lover. Miss Charlotte said, True, why are you telling me this? I could have went my whole life without knowing that. True said, because your son has given me an ultimatum. If I want to know why he left me to believe that he was dead, then I have to tell him what I did with Bosch. When I asked him if he'd been with another woman, he drug it out for months. I gave him an opportunity to tell me the truth, and he didn't. So I told him that if he wasn't ready to come clean, if he couldn't tell me the truth before I found out another way, then he better not ever ask me what I did with another nigga. He let that woman confront me, embarrass me, and then he wanted to tell me the truth. As far as I'm concerned, we should be able to call it even. But see, he ain't forget what I said, whatever's wrong with his mind. He threw it up in my face instead. And I find it real hard to believe that if I actually let this go, if I don't press him about why he let me believe he was dead, that he won't hold against me whatever he thinks I did with Bosch for the rest of our damn lives together. You know your son better than anybody else in this world. So now that you know that I had sex with another man while pregnant with his baby, while believing he was dead, do you truly believe that he can get past it, whether I tell him about it or not? And Miss Charlotte was silent. She said, exactly. And he gave me 24 hours. What if I need more time? That was like 10 hours ago. He had months to prepare for this reunion. He gonna walk in here in 14 hours with that disappointed look on his face, with judgment in his eyes. Miss Charlotte said, you have no idea what these months have done to him. You don't know what he's been through, how hard he's been working to get back to you. If you ask me, y'all both play too many games. It sounds like he doesn't want to tell you the real reason why he didn't want you to know that he was alive. And he probably figured by giving you this ultimatum, he'd be able to keep it to himself. Are you done with this man? True said, I was done with him before the families pulled him off the job. I'd ended things because it was never serious for me. And I made a point to ensure that it wasn't serious for him. Miss Charlotte asked, now, are you sure that he's done? Because just because you ended it don't mean it's over. Is he going to show back up here and start a war? Because you already know how that's going to turn out. True said, he's not nearly that stupid. Miss Charlotte said, well, I can't tell you whether my son's going to be able to put this behind him or not. But I can tell you what the last months have been like. You want to know? When True said yes, Miss Charlotte told her all about Big Wood's recovery, his emotional agony, and how quickly he'd recovered, solely so that he would not miss the birth of his first son. When she was done, she said, 12 hours, True. What you gonna do?